Hello and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today I have a special guest, my friend Nat Niddam, who has become an expert on peptides over the last few years. She is such a wonderful human and I love associating with her. And in terms of her background, she's got a wonderful podcast called the Biohacking Superhuman podcast that she's been doing for many years. She's a holistic nutritionist and a epigenetic coach. She's got a deep interest in peptides for the last few years. She's got a wonderful Facebook group that I kind of, look into and read stories of other people doing great things and sharing their recipes or what's working for them. So I frequent that quite often. And she's also got a private community where she helps individuals tailor their peptide regimens and really get the best of their health and increase or help extend their lifespan and mainly their health span, which is what we all want, is helping to live a long and healthy life as much as possible.
Yeah.
She's also available on Instagram as Nathalie Niddam, so you can find her there. Would you like to get thicker, fuller, and stronger hair? Then make sure to check out fullyvital.com. The team's come up with fantastic and natural products that help rejuvenate your hair, but also delay and reverse gray hairs. So if you're interested in better hair, go to fullyvital.com and use the code anti-aging-hacks for 15% off your order. Are you enjoying the shows on this channel? Then please make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you can get notified when we release new episodes. Our goal with this show is to help you and give you practical tips that you can use to slow down and reverse your aging so you can live and feel younger and live your best life. With that said, let's get on with the show. And with that said, Nat, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks Show.
Thank you so much, Faraz. Thanks for that lovely intro, and thanks for having me on. I'm always love talking to you.
Yeah, totally. Me too. And you have been really doing a lot of work in this space for the last few years. In the last couple, 2, 3 years, you've also been speaking on stages, and I've seen you speak on stage, and it's a lovely presentation that you talk about. And you're so passionate about the topic that you and I are going to discuss on this show. And so before we get started, Nat, I'd love to know, how did you get so passionate in this area of health, and what drives you every single day to wake up and give back to the community?
Oh, great question. So how I got into this aspect of health, like as you know, as you said, like I started off as a holistic nutritionist, then I did that first bulletproof kind of human potential coach training program. Then I got into epigenetics. So, all of us who get into these spaces, you come in through a door, and then there's another series of doors before you. And so you pick a door, and then there's another series of doors, and then you pick a door. So we just kind of, it informs our journey, these decisions we make. And it was actually quite by accident that I sat down in a lecture at a conference that I was at. And to be perfectly honest to the audience, I wish I could say that I'd read the title and said, "Ooh, I need to go there." But I was tired, and it was the closest stage, and there was an open seat. And I sat down, and there was this man talking about these things. And he's like, I have a 10, and I've not spent any time in the sun, and I use this stuff. At the time he called it melanotan. He mentioned this thing called melanotan 2. Then he started talking about this other compound that was amazing for healing, and then he started talking about this other compound called apidolon, where there had been a study done on elderly people. And it turns out that by using this product for a certain period of time, these people had better bone density, their immune system got better, their melatonin production was better, so therefore they were sleeping better. They're like all of these aspects. And I was sitting there kind of, you're kind of going, yeah, I don't know, man, is this for real?
Right.
So I kind of lean over and tap a guy's shoulder in front of me and said, is this guy for real? Like, what's he talking about? And it turns out the person in front of me was an owner of a compounding pharmacy. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? This is going to change the world. This is going to change medicine as we know it. And what the guy was talking about were peptides. And he was talking about, the last one was the bioregulator peptide called apidolon, which is the pineal gland bioregulator. And so it was one of those things where I was fascinated, and I came home and I'm telling my husband, "Oh my God, you've got to hear about this stuff." And he said, "Nat, you're constantly getting into something new. You need to just stop, use what you've got. You've got everything you need." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, you're right." It's kind of like this shiny object syndrome. But as it turns out, it was like it was an irresistible tractor beam. And that's how I really got into peptides. And I will say that I have redefined shiny object syndrome as being a perpetual learner. right?
Mm,
And I think all of us in this space are exactly that. And it's that process of walking through a door and having a series of other doors in front of you and decide and kind of moving through different things. And so, bioregulators in particular have become a huge piece of what I want to study and learn and teach about because this and peptides to a degree as well, but a little less so, but bioregulators really originate in our bodies and even peptides to a degree. And both of these modalities ultimately are leveraging your body's ability to heal and perform different processes.
mhm,
And I really believe that whenever we find something that basically engages the body's innate systems, we're in a space where, generally speaking, even though nothing is 100% anything safe or whatever, we don't have full information on everything. We're moving into a space where we're tapping into the innate wisdom of an organism, our bodies, that frankly we've yet to reproduce.
mhm.
Right? And so
Right.
if we can get far enough upstream and get those pathways activated and help them along in any way,
Mhm.
then we're really into something where you're allowing the body to do its own thing. It has checks and balances, generally speaking, built in. The challenge we have with drugs often is that they're very good sometimes at blocking a pathway or initiating a pathway, but sometimes they prevent your own checks and balances internally of kicking in,
Right.
right?
Right.
And sometimes that's what we need to do with the drug. But sometimes what ends up happening there is you end up with these side effects. So now you need another medication to offset one of the side effects of the drug. So with the bioregulators and the peptides, I feel that where you're less likely, and particularly with the bioregulators, you're not going to get into that kind of trouble.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's a
No.
really a long answer. I'm sorry, but
That's fair. I think what I read a few years ago about peptides and their origination was that they came from, or they were initially researched by Dr. Vladimir Khavinson over in Russia, and the Soviets were using it at some point in a military application for soldiers and submarines many, many decades ago. But Dr. Khavinson is what who brought them to the map, did some studies, and I also saw some data on him providing not frail, but elderly folks
Mm.
with peptides, and then seeing the all-cause mortality rates decrease over the 10 or 12 years that he was tracking them. And so, are you aware of those studies? And what did you take away from looking at some of that data?
Yeah. So Professor Khavinson really he's the GOAT. He's the guy,
That's a
right?
good, yeah.
He's the guy that as a young military doctor, the brass came to him and said, "Look, we need you to crack this reversing aging business
Hmm.
because our astronauts are coming back, with accelerated aging. We've got guys in nuclear submarines, which at that time were not that well protected, they're getting damaged. And as the military will, they're like, we need to figure out how to keep our guys
Right.
healthy and strong for as long as possible. And in those days, they were able to say to him, look, you've got whatever you need, right? Whatever funding you need lab animals, we'll get you lab animals. Once you're done with your animal testing, we've got factories full of people who could probably use this stuff.
Yeah.
So go to town. And so Cavinson devoted his entire career to researching these peptides. So what's interesting, and what you're talking about are the bioregulators specifically. And maybe we should spend a minute defining the
Hmm.
difference between the longer chain peptides and bioregulators. So, he spent over all close to 40 years studying bioregulators. And not only did he do tons of animal studies, but he also did a lot of human studies.
Hmm.
So that's what really gets people's attention. Um, and so to go back to that thing I just said, so the longer chain peptides that people might have heard of, things like BPC 157 or thymosin alpha 1, or frankly, even the GLP-1 agonists, right? The Ozempics and Mounjaros, those are peptides. Insulin is a peptide as well, right? So everybody's heard of insulin. These are typically proteins that are 50 amino acids or fewer in length. Now, amino acids, for those of you who don't know, are basically the building blocks of protein. And there's 8 or 9, depending on who you talk to, essential amino acids that the body can't produce. And then there's a whole bunch of other ones that we can kind of put together in different sequences to create proteins. So those longer chain proteins, peptides, are generally act as signaling molecules. So they'll bind to a receptor on the cell and they'll initiate a cascade of events. And that
Mhm.
cascade of events can include switching genes on and off, but it's not always that. The bioregulator, on the other hand, is no more than 4 amino acids long. So it's anywhere from 2 to 4. So they're really, really tiny. And the way that they act is they act specifically as epigenetic switches. And what that means is that they're able to get across the cellular membrane into the cell. Then they're able to get across the nuclear membrane into the nucleus of the cell.
Mhm.
And that's where your DNA lives. And there they will bind to the DNA and in that way upregulate the production of specific proteins by the DNA. And essentially, in that way, they will initiate kind of like a rejuvenation of a tissue, gland, or organ that they are specific to.
Mhm.
So those are the very oversimplified, but those are the main real differences between the longer chain peptides and the bioregulators. Now, in long chain peptide land, we have a peptide called GHKCU, which I know, Faraz, you've heard about
Yeah.
because it kind of touches on your world a little bit.
Right.
Um, and that is only 3 amino acids long. So there's a lot of people, and it very much acts on the DNA. So there are a lot of people that believe that had it been discovered by Khavinson and not by Dr. Lauren Pickart, it might be classified as a bioregulator. But
Mm.
as it stands right now, it's not.
Yeah.
But it very much is very much an epigenetic switch. I mean, it acts on over 1,000 genes, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. I was looking at some studies on GHKCU, and it's fascinating all the stuff that it can do
Crazy.
in on the skin and in the cell as well. So lovely, Nat. Thank you for the bioregulators. These can go into the cells, into the nucleus, and then they are also tissue or gland specific, as you said. So I would assume that these are, or I think we've discussed this before, that there is bioregulators for your endothelial function or your blood vessels, for example. There's bioregulators for different organs, for example. And so if you take some of these bioregulators, they're going to go specifically to that organ, to that tissue, to that gland, and then get into the DNA and then turn on specific genes for that organ to be able to rejuvenate itself, or like, heal whatever is causing it problems, because it's very, very specific to that. And so that's really cool. And we're going to need probably a lot of them to go into that specific organ to get into all of the cells, because there's a lot of cells. And so we'll talk about later how we get these, and how many do we need to take over the longer period. And so also, I believe the peptides can go through gut membranes. They can go through, like we already talked about, the cell and nucleus, but also through the gut, correct? As you're eating them?
Yeah, so they originate so here's the thing. So number 1, we have bioregulators in our bodies.
Yeah.
We make more of them when we're younger, shockingly, and as we age, we make fewer of them. And plus, your need for rejuvenation increases because of damage and stress and deficiencies and disease, like all of those different things. Eventually, that those deficiencies kind of overwhelm your body's capacity to be able to heal. And it affects your body in many different ways. Like I just did an interview with someone on the topic of stem cells yesterday. And when we're young, we have an abundance of stem cells kind of circulating in your body. And as we age, maybe not as many. And so eventually, the demand kind of outstrips the supply.
Mhm.
Now, Khavinson in his work talks about how these bioregulator peptides are present in food. Like one of the things that really tipped him off was he realized that these bioregulators are present in every single life form. Like they're preserved in every life form. They're not necessarily always the same, but like from bacteria to plants to animals, and then to humans. And so generally speaking, what I found in science is when scientists and researchers discover something that's preserved in all life forms, they're like, this must be awfully important,
Hmm.
right? For
Right.
Mother Nature to kind of encode this in all of these different life forms, this is clearly critical.
Hmm.
So he also talks about how we can get bioregulators from food, right? So those amino acid sequences are present in food. Now, the way that they've designed the nutritional supplements that provide bioregulators that people will use for for longevity purposes or therapeutic benefits, what have you, those are extracted from animal tissues, right? So, for example, we have the pineal gland bioregulator would originate from the pineal gland of young calves or pigs or sheep, depending on the manufacturing process. Um, we've got, as you mentioned, there's the blood vessel bioregulator, which will help to improve the whole circulatory system from the largest arteries and veins right down to microcapillaries in the system. And we know that everything in the body relies on proper circulation,
Hmm.
right? We need to be able to get nutrients and frankly even stem cells that are released by your bone marrow to where they need to go.
Right.
Plus we need to be able to take away any kind of waste products. Um, you've got a bioregulator for the heart. There's another one for the central nervous system, the kidneys, the lungs. So really kind of specific, but mostly the major organs. Now, there are, I think you said 21. I actually think there's 24 bioregulators right now.
Hmm.
There are most likely more,
Okay.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
at some point in those 30, 40 years, you know, Dr. Khavinson discovered a number of bioregulators. He did his testing. He did a lot of research, and were there more to be discovered? 100%. And then the other thing is, I used to say that the pineal gland bioregulator only acted on the pineal gland, the thymus bioregulator on the thymus. It turns out, again, that Professor Kevin figured out and discovered with his team of scientists that there are receptors for these bioregulators in other places. And
Hmm.
so the pineal gland bioregulator is used extensively for, the pineal gland being it controls melatonin, your circadian rhythm. It may act on telomerase, which is an enzyme that helps to restore length of telomeres or preserve the length of telomeres on the end of your DNA. Um, and there's one other thing I'm forgetting on the pineal gland, but it'll come back to me. But the pineal gland bioregulator is also used very extensively for people with eye conditions like retinitis pigmentosa, for example, because it seems that there seem to be receptors for it on the optic nerve. It also has receptors on the thymus gland, so it affects immunity. So as much as they are very kind of specific to a point on a tissue, there's also, particularly for some of these bioregulators, there's going to be receptors in different parts of the body.
Hmm. Got it. So how do you differentiate? So there's some peptides, Nat, that are very well known. For example, you might say TB500 or BPC157, Epsilon even are more common than others, or the thymosin alpha 1, for example. How does these peptides, which people have been injecting for a
Mhm.
while, compare to some of the bioregulators we're talking about? Is there a lot of overlap, or are they separate peptides in general, the bigger peptides versus the smaller bioregulators? How would you differentiate between those two?
Yeah, so they're different for a couple of reasons. Remember, we said earlier that the longer chain peptides, the BPCs, the TB500, the thymosin alpha 1, they are signaling molecules. I would say in general terms that the effect the effect they generate is more immediate. It's much more short term.
Hmm.
With the bioregulators, generally speaking, like if you think about what's happening in the body, it takes a little bit longer to experience any kind of effect, and very often the effect is not it's not it's not noticeable overnight. Now,
Yeah.
there are people that will use the pineal gland bioregulator at certain dosage that have certain issues, and they'll be like, "You know what? It's amazing how it's helped my sleep." Those
Hmm.
are generally people who have trouble with sleep. So that which brings me to a point that I think is very important to make about bioregulators, but I'm going to say something else first. The other thing is that Well, actually, it dovetails with this point, and that is that what the bioregulator really is seeking to do is restore homeostasis or balance in the body. So it's not typically boosting or suppressing,
Mm,
right? So the best example of that I can give is the thyroid bioregulator, which, if somebody's taking, and it seems that there's an epidemic of thyroid underperformance or thyroid dysfunction in the world right now.
yeah.
Um, so if people are taking desiccated thyroid, we know that someone who has an overactive thyroid is not going to take desiccated thyroid because it'll push them over the line and make them worse.
Hmm.
With a thyroid bioregulator, you can use it with someone who's either hyper or hypothyroid. And what it'll strive to do is help to rebalance the thyroid. And there are anecdotally some instances of people who were not, they hadn't been on, it's not like their thyroid had been broken and severely broken for many, many years. But in my communities, I've seen people using the thyroid bioregulator as part of a healing stack and find that they're able to start to diminish their
Hmm.
thyroid medication after a period of time.
Wonderful.
Not always,
Yeah.
but sometimes,
Hmm.
right? So,
Yeah.
so I just think, whereas with like a BPC 157, for example, which, it's an interesting peptide in that one peptide can be taken orally, it can be injected, it can be used topically, it can be used intranasally. Like there's a million different ways to administer it into the body.
Hmm.
Um, that one, very often you'll administer it and you can see an effect quite quickly because it's anti-inflammatory. Like it acts as an anti-inflammatory in the body. It activates pathways it even helps with pain. It helps with repair. Now, if you've got a musculoskeletal injury, something like that, it might take a little bit of time, but it is remarkable to me in some cases with certain people how fast they'll respond to BPC 157. But, it's become, as you know, particularly the injectable form of BPC has now been reclassified by the FDA as a class 2 compound, meaning they're saying, we're not so sure that it's safe for humans. So they basically said that for the time being, compounding pharmacy should not be compounding, blah, blah, blah. What was absent from that list was oral BPC. And so, and interestingly enough, as much as oral BPC 157 is not necessarily as efficient for certain issues, it still can be quite beneficial for a variety of issues.
Hmm. Got it. Thank you. Sometimes when I think of peptides, it's like a kid going into a candy shop and
Mm,
saying, okay, I'm aging. I get it. There's thyroid conditions that I have to think about either now or long term. There's circulation, certainly. That's top of mind for me because we'll talk about hair soon, and it's
yeah.
very important for hair as well. There's, everything. There's muscle that I need to keep. There's injuries I need to prevent or, try to heal. And so you go into this and you say, I want that and that and that and that and all of these, but there's also limited budgets and not all
Hmm.
of these are cheap at the moment, or economical for most people. So when it comes to maybe just general maintenance of your body and your health, how do you think about people stacking peptides or starting or with the bioregulators starting a program maybe slowly to cater to their more immediate needs and then general overall anti-aging?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think it depends on a number of issues, right? It depends on a person's age, right?
Hmm.
And it depends on their state of health, let's say. But generally speaking, for a younger person, let's say, who's really just wanting to, kind of dip a toe in the water and say, and by younger, I'm talking maybe, let's say 35, right? So what that person might consider doing is saying, I'm going, and I've got my triad, if you will, of the three peptides that I think that if you were only going to use three bioregulators, what are the three things we can address that are the most wide ranging in the body? And so, as you mentioned, circulation is, I mean, it's critical to everything, whether you're trying to restore or maintain your hair health or your eyes or your kidneys or any part of you. Circulation is super important. So the blood vessel bioregulator is going to be if anything you can do to help with your blood vessel health and function is going to be a benefit. So the blood vessel bioregulator is definitely in that list. The next thing, if we think about what is the thing that is implicated in virtually every illness and every chronic disease of aging, that's a dysfunctional immune system,
Hmm.
right? Like an immune system that's either exhausted or overactive, or when it comes to autoimmune diseases, whatever the case may be. So, and we know that our thymus gland involutes and really it kind of returns back to fat by the time we're about 30 years old. And so our immune system by then should be kind of doing its thing. But at the same time, as we age, your immune system starts to kind of get more tired, or it doesn't function as efficiently as it used to. So the thymus gland bioregulator is going to be another one that's going to be critical, and probably most people would benefit from, let's say, let's call it a little fine tuning, right? And then the third one typically that I will include is the pineal gland bioregulator, because that pineal gland is so central to circadian rhythm, to restoring melatonin, which frankly, melatonin itself is a massively important hormone. And so it's not just about sleep, like it's about it being an antioxidant. Epidolon, or the pineal gland bioregulator, in animal studies was also shown to have anti-tumor effects. So it also has implications for the immune system. So, and then you've got this whole issue of telomeres, which is very much debated in longevity space. But at the end of the day, we don't want itty bitty teeny tiny telomeres, because that means our DNA can no longer replicate, right?
Hmm.
And what I like about this whole idea of the bioregulators is because they modulate, because they go back to homeostasis, it's not that we're saying if you take Epidolon, you're going to end up with super long telomeres, because we know that excessively long telomeres is a hallmark of cancer cells.
Yeah.
So God forbid we kind of end up on that side of the equation. So the pineal gland bioregulator with the blood vessel and the thymus, to me, really kind of, if somebody was saying, I don't really have anything massive going on here, I just want to make sure that I give my body some support, then, in that 35 to 40, 45-year-old age group, you might do that stack once, maybe twice a year.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And these days, I would say twice a year, mostly because we're exposed to so many stressors, so many toxins. There's so much going on in the world right now that is frankly out of our control, that's putting a lot of stress on our bodies.
Hmm.
Then doing this a couple of times a year is going to, hopefully kind of shore up your defenses a little bit. Right.
Totally.
And as we get older, we might say, we might over 50, we might say, you know what, I'm going to do this every quarter.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one thing we didn't really talk about on the bioregulator front is that you can get them as a nutritional supplement, which is an oral capsule. And that's an actual, very purified extract from those tissues, glands, and organs of animals. But they've also, with the exception of 5 of the bioregulators, the researchers identified the key amino acid sequence that was the most active in each one of these bioregulators. And so those sequences can be and have been reproduced as synthetic versions
Hmm.
of the bioregulators in labs. And so those can be administered either by subcutaneous injection, or more and more now we're seeing that they're being produced as sublingual drops, right? Because remember, they're so tiny. I mean, Lord knows if they can get across the cell membrane, they can definitely be absorbed by through the blood vessels under the tongue. Like the area under your tongue is very, very vascular. Like there's a lot of blood vessels there. And that's why there's a lot of, certain medications and supplements that can be held under the tongue, and because they get absorbed from there. And the
Yeah.
same is true for those bioregulators. And we're starting to see them in a number of different applications. Like I've seen some transdermal drops. I have no real experience with those, but definitely the sublingual synthetic bioregulator is an option to the oral bioregulator. And, when we talked about them being available in food before, another thing that I really like to talk about is if we think about where they're coming from, being tissues, glands, and organs of animals, it's not a stretch to say that if you are one of those people that does eat organ meats, you probably are getting access to bioregulators from those organ meats.
Mhm.
And if you can't bring yourself to eating liver and heart and frankly, there's lots of bits and bobs of animals you couldn't get your hands on as food even if you tried. Then you could look to companies like, I know, Paleo Valley, Ancestral Supplements, Heart and Soil. These are all companies that take animal organs, desiccate them, powder them, and put them into capsules. And again, you're going to get maybe they're a little bit more even than you would through just eating liver, because you're going
Mhm.
to get more in a smaller package.
Right.
Um, I do believe that a lot of the incredible results people get sometimes from those supplements, some of it can be tied back to giving them access to these bioregulators.
Mm. Okay, that's very interesting. I had a follow-on question on the synthetic bioregulators that you just mentioned. So number one, I'm assuming that because they're being made, they're deemed safe by experts in the field, which is
By
number
experts,
one.
yeah, yeah.
By, okay, not by any authority like the FDA,
No, I mean,
because
you
that's
know,
not regulated.
yeah, the
Yeah.
FDA somehow included apidolon on that list of class 2 compounds. So
Hmm.
it's, so it's kind of on the no list as a synthetic injectable.
Okay. Okay, so that one you can't get, or you should watch out for, or proceed with caution because the FDA has issued some kind of warning for it. The other question would be synthetic versus natural. Is there a cost difference that people should pick one or the other?
So there's definitely a cost difference. I mean, if you think about it, having to raise animals and then harvest organs and then process them, and like that's just a much more expensive proposition
Mhm.
than sitting in a lab. And even though putting peptides together, putting amino acids together into the exact configuration to create that bioregulator is a complex process, it's not close to as expensive as producing the nutritional supplement. So the nutritional
Mhm.
supplement typically is going to be the most expensive one. The synthetic is going to be usually the more affordable. Now the synthetics are also affordable, available as oral supplements, like as capsules. It just came to me. There's a manufacturer that makes those, and then as the injectables, those are typically only available through research labs for research purposes only. But those will be the most cost efficient.
Okay. Is that a
They'll
wink
be,
wink for research purposes only, or is it truly
well,
for
I
research
mean, it's,
purposes?
it's a fine line, right?
Yeah.
So they're in the biohacking space, in this space that we're in, um, definitely they are not intended for human use. They're not cleared for human use. So it's for the people who choose to go that route, it's a decision that they're making for themselves,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And the research labs are very, very clear about that. What's difficult right now is it seems that there's a new research lab popping up every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And many of them are just sourcing from overseas and willy-nilly bringing them in. And so there's a very, there's a very heavy onus on the individual to do their homework and be sure that what they're getting is what they're buying, what they
Hmm.
think they're getting is what they're buying, that it's been properly processed so there's no chemicals left behind, that what is said and is to be in the vial in terms of quantity, in terms of purity, all that stuff is actually what's in there. Like there's a guy that I know who has a lab. It took him, I think it cost him $17,000 and 7 batches of testing from different labs for this one compound before he found one that was effective, that was clean, and that was what they said it was.
Yikes.
So it's a tricky landscape out there.
Yeah, and so I think your best bet is not to go on Google and try to find a research lab that's selling you the peptide that you're looking for, but instead be part of a community or certainly get access to an expert like yourself, Nat, because you do this a lot, week after week. And
Yeah, or there's even doctors in the function, a lot of an increasing number. What's the beautiful thing that's happened over the last number of years is the number of doctors in the functional medicine or
Mhm.
or whatever we want to call it, space, who have been like incredibly committed to researching using these clinically and seeing what happens. Now, less so on the bioregulator front, much more so on the longer chain peptides. But there are some really amazing clinicians out there right now who are, and that's part of the heartbreak of the what happened with the FDA in November, is that there's so many people that are being helped
Hmm.
with peptides with legit medical conditions. And I mean, I don't work with people who have health issues. I'm not a medical doctor.
Yeah.
I'm not, it's above my pay grade in many different ways.
Hmm.
But these doctors are really helping to move the needle with people in ways that are astounding.
Wonderful. Okay, so definitely find one of these doctors that can help you, and I'm sure some research can get you there. In terms
Mhm.
of the three essentials, so to speak, that you recommended for the peptides, the circulation, the thymus gland, as well as I believe epitalon is one you
Mhm.
mentioned.
The pineal gland. Yeah.
Yeah, the pineal gland. For these three, once or twice a year, what does that look like? What does that cycle look like? Is it an oral cycle and you take it for a few weeks and then it's done in a month or two? And how long does it last? When do you take it? Is it in the morning after a meal? Tell us some more details on how to actually administer these.
So if you're going the nutritional supplement route, it's oral, and it would be I would say a 30-day course of all three at the same time. I would
Hmm.
do all three simultaneously. Um, and then um I, usually would take them away from food just to I don't really think it makes that much of a difference, but I think if you think about it, if they're present in food, right? When you read the literature, what Professor Khavinson would explain is that there's something in nature that the way these are configured, there's when they get cleaved out from food, there's specific markers that define where a protein is going to get broken down. And there are specific transporters in the gut that actually will transport these sequences. So the sequences are almost protected, if you will, by nature, like by convention in nature, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so you should be able to take them with food. I know a lot of people prefer taking them away from food, and
Hmm.
not that they're going to make you sick or anything. They just feel like it's a cleaner landscape, if you will. So I also recommend generally that people take them in the morning or in the first part of the day.
Hmm.
And what was the other question? And then for if you decide to go to the synthetic route, you can do oral synthetics, take them as capsules.
Hmm.
Not as many people are willing to get into this whole idea of, going out, buying insulin needles,
Right.
reconstituting their peptides, then injecting themselves. Like it's a whole other leap, right? I
Right.
mean, some people are willing to do that, but a lot of people would prefer not to go that route.
Hmm.
Now, I will say that it's like I said before, it is the cheapest way to go for
Yeah.
someone who's very budget conscious, but it does
Hmm.
involve, it's a bit more of a hurdle.
Yeah, we've both done that before, so we're open to it for sure. Okay, so I guess last question on the bioregulator front. As we know, aging is progressive. It continues at the moment. And so at 35, what you're doing is not enough for you at 45 or 55. And so let's think about some of the other challenges that come up as you get older. Certainly, your eyesight starts to degrade in your early
Mhm.
40s. Then you've got maybe the midlife pouch where you've got some obesity coming in, visceral fat, some insulin resistance. You've potentially got heart issues. Your kidneys maybe aren't doing as well. What are these regulators available for all the organs, and can you kind of lean on them as you need to?
Yeah, all the major ones. But what I want to say is the bioregulator on its own is not going to fix all your problems,
Yeah.
right? Like it just isn't. It's a really powerful adjunct to doing all the other things. So, and I think this is a point that many people either gloss over or miss. And it's human nature. We're looking for what's the silver bullet? What's the
Yeah.
one thing that's going to make it all go away?
Right. Right.
And right?
Go away. Yeah.
So, so let's say for example, I don't know, let's say you've got blood sugar issues. right? So there's a bioregulator for the pancreas and there's a bioregulator for the liver. And we would probably combine that with the blood vessel bioregulator just because why not? I think
Hmm.
it's a good combination there. Um, but it behooves you to also fix your diet and get active. And maybe you're going to need to also be using some dihydroberberine, or, you're maybe wear a continuous glucose monitor so you can figure out what are the foods that are really affecting you. You may have to pay attention to your microbiome because we know that the microbiome has a massive impact on how we process the foods that we eat, and imbalances in the microbiome are going to affect the way your body manages blood glucose. Your sleep. If you're not sleeping and you're chronically stressed to the nines, you can take bioregulators till the cows come home. The
Right.
cows without the bioregulators in, you just, and it's really not going to help. And, I think that, a sad case in point on this, and I mean, not that anybody knows for sure, nobody really knows what happened, but Professor Khavinson himself passed away in December of last year, of 2023.
Yeah, I
And he was
heard.
only 77 years old, right? So he was a relatively young guy by modern terms, right? You
Hmm.
go back a couple hundred years, 77 years old. Oh my God, he made it that far. That's amazing. These days, 77, people have an expectation that they're actually hiking mountains and doing amazing things, maybe starting a new career, like who knows, right?
Right.
Depending on the person. And so, first thing I'll say is nobody really knows what happened, that nobody's come forward to say this is what happened to Professor Khavinson. But people that I know who knew him quite well would have said that, he was a guy that was very busy. He was a guy that was very under a lot of stress. He didn't necessarily have the time to take care of himself in all the ways that needed to happen. And to me, that really is a very sad example of highlighting the point that you can have all the bioregulators you want, but if you're not able to lean into and do everything else to support those systems. So, for example, if you have a thyroid issue, you're going to use the thyroid bioregulator, but do you have thyroid antibodies at play? Do you need to cut gluten? Do you have are you exposed to compounds like chlorine that are going to compete and displace the iodine or fluoride off your thyroid hormone so that it
Right.
can't perform properly? Do you have a deficiency in iodine? Do you have a deficiency in selenium? So I think that, and especially as we age, it behooves us, and frankly, start young, because that heart disease or that type 2 diabetes or whatever, kidney failure, whatever it is that shows up when you're 50, 60, or 70, it didn't start when you were 50, 60, or 70. It's been building since you were 30,
Yeah.
right? These are deficiencies and stresses for the most part. I mean, unless you develop type 1 diabetes because you were exposed to some horrible toxin and that causes your pancreas to shut down, that can happen almost overnight. But for the most part, all of these chronic diseases of aging are things that build over decades. And so all of those lifestyle things that all of us people on this side of the mic and your side of the mic are constantly harping about, nothing is going to replace those foundations.
Yeah.
And so if we want to use bioregulators to help ourselves to age better, potentially maybe reverse aging, and that's a really hot topic right now, and I think it's a hot potato. A lot remains to be discovered in
Yes.
that area.
Yeah.
But if we want to age better, then we have to lean into all the things, no matter how boring they are, right?
Hmm.
And then we can bring in bioregulators. And sometimes in cases where we have an illness or we've developed a condition, sometimes we're going to have to stack the bioregulator with the medication, at
Yeah.
least for a period of time, to support the body. And some of the most interesting studies that were done on bioregulators showed that if they took a sick population, and there was one in particular, I think it was bronchitis or COPD, like one of these lung conditions, and they gave people either traditional medication on its own, or they gave them traditional medication with the a couple of the bioregulators, one of them being the lung bioregulator. And they found that the people who got the medication had a predictable course. The people who were given the bioregulators actually did better, right? They got better results faster. So they played really well in that case with the medication. So it seems that they can be woven in with all of the lifestyle, the supplements, and in some cases, maybe with medications.
Yeah, really well said. If you have made it this far in the interview, I would highly recommend rewinding it 2 minutes to kind of hear Nathalie rant a little bit about
Sorry.
how to use. It's very important because you and I and other people we know in this space want to jump into the next really cool snazzy thing, which
Mhm,
does have a lot of benefits. But if you don't cover the basis, you're wasting your money. You're pissing your money into the wind. And
mhm.
so, with that said, Nat, please tell us where people can find you. Tell us about your community. Tell us about your Facebook group and your podcast as well.
Thank you. So where you can find me, there's two places. I mean, you can find me on Instagram at Nathalie Niddam. Nathalie has an H, but you'll see that in the show notes. So make sure you check the spelling because it's not a common spelling always. So at Nathalie Niddam on Instagram. My website is natniddam.com, and that's where you kind of find everything. Also, if you sign up for my newsletter on my website, you'll get access to everything else. Obviously, there's the Biohacking Superhuman Performance podcast where I interview amazing people like Faraz, for example. And put out at least one, sometimes two episodes a week. And then there's the membership community on Mighty Networks. But that you would find out about that on the website under BSP community, B like Bob, S like a superhuman, P like performance. And then there's, as Faraz said, the Facebook community. I'm not in there as much anymore. That's the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group. But I have an amazing moderator, and it's a very active community. It for some people it can be a little bit overwhelming. It's pretty big, so it just depends on where you're at in your journey and what you're looking for.
Hmm. Wonderful, Nat. Thank you so much for coming on the Anti-Aging Hack Show again.
Thank you so much, Faraz. It's been, as always, a pleasure.